Rose, she right now is roughly about 72, 73 years old. But earlier in her life, she was married to a guy named Dan. And Dan was very, very abusive. Physically, verbally, emotionally. 20 years, Rose endured this suffering. Well, the marriage finally fell apart, and they were divorced. And about 3 or 4 years later, Rose met Ed. And Ed was the complete opposite of Dan. I mean, like night and day different. Ed was a loving, caring husband who deeply cared about her and asked her daily, what can I do for you today? About 9 to 10 months after they were married, they found out that Ed was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor, cancerous brain tumor. And slowly his body started to fail. Because it was in his brain, different parts of his brain started shutting down. And one of the first places that shut down in his brain was his ability to speak. So towards the end of his life, Ed, the only way he could communicate was to blink. And he could only answer yes or no questions. Once for yes, twice for no. Again, that's once for yes, twice for no. So it was getting pretty bad physically, and so they decided to call hospice in. And the person that was assigned to them from hospice was a guy named Stephen. Stephen knew of Rose and Ed's faith. And the first thing he said when he walked in was, I need you to let you know that I'm a skeptic. I'll respect you, but I'm a skeptic. I was like, okay. Well, as Ed and Stephen got to know each other, Stephen began to care deeply for Ed, because Ed was just one of those guys that you just like, right? Rose knew the end was coming, and she was very nervous, and she has had all kinds of anxiety about Ed, dying and her being left alone. So one night, it was late at night, and she was up with Ed, and she could tell that Ed's breathing was starting to get more and more laborious, and she knew that the time was coming, and so she prayed, Lord, I just need to know you're with me. I just need to know your peace. And she said physically, she felt something wrap around her, and she instantly had peace. About 20 minutes later, Ed went to go be with Jesus. The very next day, she gets a phone call from Stephen and says, Rose, I need to let you know that last night I gave my heart to Jesus. Because I was a skeptic. But when I looked into the eyes of Ed, I saw a peace that I didn't understand. And I knew that the stuff that was going on in me needed that peace. And I gave my heart to Jesus. Rose shared that story with Ed's mother, and this was his mother's response. Then it was all worth it. You see, they went through suffering. They didn't get it. But it was because Stephen needed to come to faith in Jesus.